So now that we know that Terastallization will give access to the Pokemon's previous stats, I wanted to talk about what Pokemon I think could benefit from this. In my previous video, I talked about what Pokemon's abilities best take use of this and what Pokemon best take use of this because of their ability. So if you haven't seen that, make sure you check that out. But today I am going to be talking about potential spoilers and leaks, because without that, this video doesn't have a lot of substance to it. So if you are avoiding leaks or spoilers, you can turn away now. I won't be mad. Like and subscribe before you leave though. But we'll talk about it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we go. So this is so far a guesstimate on what has come to Scarlet and Violet, what is going to come to Scarlet and Violet. And when Pearl Enthusiasts first made this, they did make some corrections, but Riddler Coup, the big leaker on the scene, basically said, hey, this is pretty spot on. This is pretty accurate. You have some spots wrong. So we can assume that this list is going to be pretty wholesome and pretty accurate. So I want to talk about some mons that stick out to me that I think could benefit from a type change or a different type or an extra stab, and why. So if you guys enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I've already started a list, and the first one I want to talk about is Moltres. So Moltres, with that fire and flying, takes 4-time weakness to rock, takes neutral to ice, takes ×2 to electric, has a lot of weaknesses. The only thing that really benefits it is its flying type, giving it a ground immunity to help out with the fire typing. But it does have Scorching Sands, so we could turn that into... This is assuming that Scorching Sands is going to be in the game by the time that Moltres is in the game. So if we change Moltres to a ground type, we'll keep the stab on fire and flying, and then we'll get stab on Scorching Sands, just another chance to burn a Pokemon. And if you see here, we lose some resistances. We lose a decent amount of resistances, but we lose that ×2, that ×4 to rock, and that ×2 to electric. We do gain a grass weakness and an ice weakness, but Moltres still has stab on things like Flamethrower and Heat Wave that could handle these two typings. And then you could always have a partner deal with the water, and you probably wouldn't be putting Moltres in front of a water type anyway. You switch the ground immunity to an electric immunity, but instead of electric being a weakness, ground is now just neutral damage, and then now you are resistant to those rock type attacks that hit Moltres so hard at the beginning. So I think a ground type Moltres would be okay. You know, you do lose some resistance, but I think the counterplay of what you gain is pretty good. The next one I want to talk about is Dhelmise. Dhelmise is one that I talked about in my previous video because of its ability Steel Worker, and I didn't know at the time when I was talking about Dhelmise. I was like, if Dhelmise is in the game, I forgot that Dhelmise was featured on this page of potential leaks, so it's right here. And if we look at Dhelmise, if we go to a water type, and I think it would be a good water terastallization, you get the stab on ghost, you get the stab on grass, you get the stab on water, and then because of Steelworker, you get a stab on steel type as well. So I think this would be a really good Trick Room Assault Vest mon. So you lose out on the immunities to normal and fighting, which isn't that big of a deal because they become normal damage. But look how many weaknesses you're missing. You lose the fire weakness, you lose the ice weakness, the flying weakness, the ghost weakness, the dark weakness, all big types in competitive. Granted, electric and grass are as well, but you can always have a partner next to the Pokemon that is going to handle it. And that if you are tacking on an Assault Vest to Dhelmise, its bulk isn't that bad. Shot and Shadow Claw is still going to do a whole lot of damage to those grass and water types. So I think Dhelmise is a really interesting one for Terastallization, just because as long as you don't go with the Steel, Ghost, or Grass, you are getting a potential 4 stabs, which this will be the only Pokemon that will be able to do such a thing. Next up is one that we have been talking about basically the whole time since we found out what Terastallization was, and that is Tyranitar. So the one thing about Tyranitar is Tyranitar has a lot of weaknesses with its type combination. With the Rock and Darkness, it's weak to Fighting, it's weak to Fairy, it's weak to Water, it's weak to Grass, I believe. It's weak to a lot of things. It has more than 5 weaknesses, I think 6 in all honesty. But everyone's been talking about Ghost type Tyranitar. So if we do Tyranitar and we go over to Ghost, like, yeah, you get a Stab Shadow Claw, which could be really good, and you lose a lot of weaknesses. Actually, no weaknesses change. The weaknesses that you have now as a Ghost type were resistances, so people might be hesitant to hit your Tyranitar with a Ghost type move, with a Dark type move, if they think that you're not going to Terastallize. And all of these weaknesses basically become neutral damage, and it gains immunity to Fighting. Now, Fighting is really bad for Tyranitar because with the Rock and Dark typing, it is ×4 weak to Fighting type. But I also think with Aerial Ace, you could also do a Flying one. So granted, you do still retain some weaknesses, like you gain Electric, Ice, and Rock. How often are you going to be launching a Rock type move into a Tyranitar? The same thing with the Ghost in the Dark. On the chance that you don't Terastallize it, are you going to take that risk of it being a normal damage or a ×2 damage? You get an immunity to Ground, which I feel like Ground is a very common type to deal with Tyranitar, because before it's ×2 weak, so ground moves are something you have to worry about with Tyranitar. And then you get Resistance and Fighting, Bug, and Grass, all moves that used to hit Tyranitar really hard, and then everything else that was a weakness for Tyranitar is now just normal damage. So I think if Ghost type Tyranitar becomes normal play and it's something that starts to get countered, you could always switch it to a Flying type Terastal Tyranitar and, just switch it up, catch your opponents off guard, because like I said, they could go, if you're going Ghost type, they could hit you with that Dark type move or a Bug type move, and with the Flying one, it's either going to take neutral or it's going to be resisted, which I think could be pretty good counterplay. We'll just have to see how Tyranitar in the metagame evolves as it goes on. Next up is Basculegion, and Basculegion I didn't put any moves in because Basculegion has a really good typing to begin with. So my idea was a Dark type Basculegion. So you get adaptability, Stab Boosted, Crunch, which I think would be really good for Basculegion. That means it would have 3 stabs that are adaptability boosted, and it would do really well with hitting hard. But as you can see, the trade-offs aren't really that great. You resist so much with Basculegion's typing already that I just don't think it's worth it. I think you're better off with Basculegion carrying the crunch, getting the normal damage amount, and just working around it. Because there are going to be moves that you can tech. The electric weakness, the grass weakness, the ghost and the dark kind of suck because they're super common moves. But changing to a dark type, you're still weak to fairy, you're still weak to fighting, you're still weak to bug. So I don't know. And you lose a whole lot of resistances and you go from 2 immunities to 1. So I don't know if it's worth it. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about that. But the next one is Hydreigon. Hydreigon is one of those ones that are just like, duh, steel type. It's just like Tyranitar, where we've been talking about it since we found out about Terastallization. And I mean, the steel typing for Hydreigon is good. You really can't argue that. So you take your 4x fairy weakness and you turn it into a times 0.5 resistance. Your weaknesses are ground, fighting, and fire. And with Hydreigon, you have levitate. So that ground type weakness, you don't have to worry about. You're immune to it unless they give you like an iron ball or gravity. And then for the fire type, you have earth power. Earth power coming from Hydreigon, even without the stab boost from a 125 special attacker, is pretty good, and it's going to hit most fire type mons really hard, especially mons like Ensign if it's in the game. And what else would we have to worry about? Typhlosion. It's going to hit Typhlosion hard. Really, the only fire type you have to worry about is Talonflame and Charizard. And I mean, you just put a decent electric type or water type next to it because they're both flying, and maybe Moltres when that time comes where Moltres is allowed into the metagame. The fire type isn't really that big of a deal, especially with earth power. All these grounded fire types aren't going to want to take an earth power from Hydreigon. So I, just like everyone else, I agree that the steel typing is really good for Hydreigon. These ones are weird picks, but Gogoat. So one thing I noticed about Gogoat is that it has really good HP, solid like special defense, and the ability Grass Pelt. So we don't know if any grassy terrain setters are coming to Scarlet and Violet yet. So far, the answer is no, but it's definitely a move that you can put on a lot of grass types, including Gogoat itself. So a Grass Pelt, it basically gets a defensive assault vest with a 1.5 boost when grassy terrain is active. You could give it an assault vest. I don't know why assault vest is my go-to item, but then you double the defenses with a high base HP and Horn Leech for reliable recovery. And then what I would do with Gogoat, sorry about that. What I would do with Gogoat is use Wild Charge to get a electric type, because electric typing is really good offensively. It's pretty good defensively as well. It resists steel, electric, and flying. Flying is one of those moves that Gogoat doesn't take well as a grass type, and all of the other weaknesses that Gogoat has becomes normal damage. So the only trade-off to this is that you have a ×2 weakness to ground, but like I said before, you have, if you get grassy terrain up, you'll have double defenses, or if you're assault vested, you'll have 1.5 I didn't mean double, I mean 1.5 defense if you have grassy terrain up, and if you do assault vest, you have 1.5 special defense. So it's going to take ground moves pretty well, especially if you do get the grassy terrain up. And then Horn Leech will hit a lot of ground types really hard and get recovery back. So I think Gogoat could be a very solid mon if you could get it set up properly as a electric type Terastallization user. And it's one of those mons where like 68 speed isn't the best. So it has 88 base speed. It's just it's like, it's not fast enough to be good without Trick Room. It's not slow enough to be good in Trick Room. But it can still be used pretty well, I think, especially if you get these defensive boosts and you play your calcs right. But I think you would prefer to run at max speed. It's like 120. We'll do 120 Jolly. 132. Not the best. The last two that I have are also slower. So with Decidueye, you have Long Reach, doesn't make contact. I don't think that's that good. I think Overgrow would be fine on it, where you're getting a boost to the Leaf Blade on top of the stab. But for Decidueye, one of the complaints that we had with Decidueye being a ghost and grass type is that it lost its flying type resistances that people really liked with Rowlet and Dartrix. So with a flying type, you get 3 stabs, 3 really good moves to go with it, with Leaf Blade, Spirit Shackle, and Brave Bird, which hit really hard. Brave Bird is usually seen on Decidueye anyway. So you lose out on some of the ghost type immunities, but you also lose that dark type weakness. It becomes normal damage. That flying type weakness becomes normal damage. Fire type weakness becomes normal damage. The only thing that stays really is the ice when you switch to a flying type. And I feel like Decidueye might have a physical attacking fighting move to deal with ice type Pokemon. Maybe I'm wrong. Does have low sweep. Not that great. No, so you do have to still factor in ice type Pokemon if you would use Decidueye this way. And the last Pokemon I want to talk about is Kleavor. Kleavor, once again, is one of those Pokemon that its ability really helps it out, and its typing is not that great. So for Kleavor, I'm thinking Stone Axe won't save because it's not on Showdown. But what I was thinking with Kleavor is that you could switch to a fighting type and get a stab sheer force boosted. So I forget, does sheer force affect? Close combat. Close combat has a second effect, but it's a negative one. So I think this goes through. I think sheer force does not boost close combat. No, it does not. I think Stone Axe would. Stone Axe would definitely get a sheer force boost. But let's see what other fighting type moves it could get. And see if we could find something that does take advantage of that sheer force. Its move pool is really weak. It does have Rock Smash. No. I think it will get a little more filling to its move pool. I don't think its move pool is that great, but I also think that was an issue with Pokemon Legends Arceus and not Kleavor itself. But yeah, even without sheer force, getting a stab close combat from a Pokemon like Kleavor is pretty good. You can also get the Stone Axe, which is aiming to land a critical hit. And even if the splinters stay in the game, if you lose those and get a sheer force boost, I think it's really worth it. Because sheer force on top of stab. You also have stab X scissor. And yeah, I do think this Pokemon will get more moves. You could do something like Protect. You can do something like Swords Dance. And let's look at the typing. So we do Kleavor and we do Fighting type. So Fighting type, it's kind of meh because you have the same kind of weaknesses. They're just all switched around. You get a little more resistances, which the resistant to dark and the resistant to rock is really good. Especially with Kleavor being weak to rock while being a rock type. Kind of sucked. Losing that water type weakness is also really good defensively for Kleavor. But yeah, that is going to be all. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this list of Mons and how I think they should terastallize. You guys might have different opinions. What Pokemon do you think is really going to benefit from the 3-stab terastallization? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you made it this far in the video. I want to say thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Zach, and we'll see everyone later.